think that piece of metal gives you the right to mouth off in my lot? Huh? Walking around like you own the place, flashing that thing in my face?
I'm standing here, officer. That's
Don't
all.
play that calm act with me. You Navy boys come back, think you're untouchable. Not in my town. Not today.
Then maybe take a step back.
It's 10 a.m., a bright sunny morning, at a bustling suburban mall. The crowd watches in horror as a man in a pristine Navy SEAL dress blue uniform is slammed against a military jeep. On his chest glitters the Navy Cross, a medal earned in the blood-soaked sands of overseas combat. But to Officer Rollins, this black man isn't a commander. He's a target. This is a moment a routine stop turned into a catastrophic violation of civil rights. Rollins thought he was enforcing the law, but he was actually walking into a $5 million trap set by the very elite warriors he just insulted. The fallout will shake this department to its core. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you are watching from right now. Whether you are anywhere else in the world, I want to hear from you. And if you are a new member, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you stories like this. Now, let's get back to what happened. To understand why this encounter was so explosive, you first have to understand the man standing in the center of the storm. Marcus Reed isn't just a soldier. In the elite circles of the United States military, he is a ghost of the battlefield and a titan of leadership. As a commander in the Navy SEALs, Marcus spent 2 decades operating in the shadows of the world's most dangerous conflict zones. He is a recipient of the Navy Cross, an honor so rare and so prestigious that even 4-star generals stand at attention when he enters a room. To the men who served under him, he is an unbreakable shield. To the enemies of this nation, he is a nightmare they never see coming. But today, Marcus wasn't looking for a fight. He was standing in a sun-drenched parking lot next to his rugged military jeep, looking every bit the part of a high-ranking officer in his sharp summer white dress uniform. His medals were pinned with mathematical precision, glinting under the 10 a.m. sun. This is a man who has advised Pentagon officials and led Tier 1 operators through missions that will never see the light of day. His reputation is spotless. His integrity is his lifeblood in his hometown. He is a quiet pillar of community, a mentor to young veterans, and a man whose handshake is as good as a signed contract. There is a specific kind of aura that surrounds a man like Marcus Reed, a quiet, heavy authority that doesn't need a shout to be felt. He carries himself with the calm of a man who has seen the worst the world has to offer and survived it all. He is a VIP in the truest sense of the word, a man whose phone contacts include senators and high-ranking intelligence officials. Yet, despite his immense power and elite status, Marcus remains humble. He was at the mall for a simple errand, representing the Navy with the pride and dignity the uniform demands. However, beneath that calm exterior lies a dangerous level of tactical patience. A Navy SEAL is trained to observe, to evaluate, and to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Marcus knew exactly who he was, and he knew exactly what his rights were. He didn't need to bark orders or flash his credentials to feel powerful. He stood there, a silent mountain of a man, watching a storm of prejudice and arrogance gather in the eyes of a local police officer. Little did Officer Rollins know, he wasn't just harassing a civilian. He was poking a lion that had the entire weight of the United States military and the federal government standing right behind him. The calm morning air was shattered by the aggressive chirp of a siren. As Officer Rollins pulled his cruiser diagonally across Marcus's jeep, cutting off in the exit, Rollins stepped out not with a greeting, but with a sneer of pure suspicion. He didn't see the Navy Cross. He didn't see the steady, disciplined posture of a commander. He saw a black man in a high-ranking uniform, and his bias told him it was impossible. Rollins adjusted his belt, his hand hovering near his holster as he approached, his eyes scanning Marcus with a predatory gaze. "All right, buddy, let's see some real ID," Rollins barked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Where did you buy the costume? This is a federal offense. You think you can walk around playing soldier in my town?" Marcus remained unnervingly still. He could have ended the encounter in seconds by flashing his military credentials, but he chose a different path. He wanted to see if Rollins was looking for the truth or looking for a victim. "Officer, I am parked legally and I am wearing my uniform with pride. Why exactly was I stopped?" Marcus asked, his voice low and firm. Rollins scoffed, stepping into Marcus's personal space, a move designed to intimidate. I asked the questions. You look like a fraud to me. Now hand over the ID, or I'm taking you in for stolen valor right now. The absurdity was staggering. Marcus was standing next to a registered military vehicle, dressed in a regulation uniform that cost more than Rollins's monthly salary. Yet the officer was blinded by his own prejudice. Marcus kept his hands visible but didn't reach for his wallet. He was giving Rollins every chance to act with professional integrity, but the officer was doubling down on his arrogance. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife as the crowd began to pull out their phones, sensing a disaster in the making. What would you do if you were treated like a criminal while standing in your own shoes of honor? The situation spiraled from a tense standoff into a full-blown constitutional nightmare in a matter of seconds. Driven by a toxic mix of ego and adrenaline, Officer Rollins completely lost control. He didn't just ignore the law. He set it on fire. With a snarl of rage, Rollins lunged forward, grabbing Commander Reed and slamming him violently against the side of his own Jeep. The sound of metal meeting bone echoed across the parking lot. "You're done playing hero, boy," Rollins screamed, his face inches from Marcus's, his breath hot with malice. Without a warrant, without probable cause, and without a shred of professional decency, Rollins began a frantic, illegal search. He ripped open the door of the military Jeep, tossing personal belongings onto the asphalt like they were trash. He reached into Marcus's pockets, tearing through his clothes. When he saw Marcus's phone sitting on the dashboard, he snatched it and threw it into the dirt. "You think you're recording me? You think you have rights?" Rollins barked, his voice cracking with unhinged authority. He was violating the Fourth Amendment in broad daylight, stomping on the very Constitution that Marcus Reed had shed blood to defend on foreign soil. The insults grew darker and more personal. Rollins mocked the medals on Marcus's chest, calling them cheap plastic and pawn shop junk. He screamed profanities, his hand trembling on his taser, looking for any excuse to pull the trigger on a man who hadn't raised a single finger in aggression. The officer was blinded by his own power trip, convinced he could erase the dignity of a Navy SEAL with brute force and loud words. He felt untouchable. He felt like the judge, jury, and executioner of that parking lot. But Rollins made a fatal tactical error. In his blind fury, he was so focused on the man he was assaulting that he completely missed the small blinking red light embedded in the Jeep's grille. He didn't see the high-definition dash cam, or the 3 different angles of hidden security cameras from a mall's perimeter. Every illegal grab, every screamed insult, and every violent shove was being recorded in crystal-clear 4K. He was handing the prosecution a rope they would eventually use to hang his career. The trap was locked. The evidence was mounting, and the fallout was going to be absolutely atomic. Just as Officer Rollins reached for his handcuffs to finalize his career-ending mistake, the atmosphere in the parking lot shifted from chaotic to deathly silent. 4 black SUVs roared into the lot, flanking the scene with military precision. Before Rollins could even shout an order, a dozen men stepped out. They were giants, composed, lethal, and radiating a level of authority that made the local police officer look like a child playing dress-up. Marcus Reed finally moved. With a calm, deliberate motion, he reached into his breast pocket and produced a heavy, gold-crested leather wallet. He flipped it open. The silence that followed was deafening. Inside was a Department of Defense high-level intelligence ID stamped with the unmistakable seal of the United States Navy and the rank of commander. One of the men from the SUVs, a tall, battle-hardened operator, stepped forward and snapped a crisp, razor-sharp salute. "Commander Reed, we're ready to roll, sir. Is there a problem with this local officer?" The transformation in Rollins was instantaneous and pathetic. The blood drained from his face so fast he turned a sickly shade of gray. His jaw literally dropped as he looked from the ID to the sea of elite SEAL operators surrounding him. The arrogant sneer was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He tried to speak, but his voice came out as a broken, high-pitched stammer. I didn't, sir. I thought the uniform looked. I was just..." He began to physically tremble, his hands shaking so violently he had to grip his belt to keep them still. In one soul-crushing moment, he realized he hadn't just harassed a civilian. He had assaulted a Tier 1 commander in front of his entire team and a dozen high-definition cameras. He had mocked a Navy Cross recipient while violating the very laws he was sworn to uphold. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted. It had been pulverized. Marcus Reed didn't yell. He didn't need to. He simply looked Rollins in the eye with a gaze that had stared down terrorists, and the officer looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. Rollins was no longer the hunter. He was a prey, caught in a legal and professional trap of his own making. The fallout was swift, surgical, and utterly relentless. This wasn't going to be handled by the local precinct or swept under the rug by a friendly captain. Because a high-ranking naval officer was involved, the federal government moved in with tidal force. Within hours, agents from the FBI and the Department of Justice seized every frame of footage from the scene. They didn't just take the body cam Rollins had tried to turn off. They extracted data from Marcus Reed's encrypted military dash cam and the mall's overhead 4K surveillance system. The evidence was undeniable, showing a clear, unprovoked assault and blatant disregard for the U.S. Constitution. As federal investigators peeled back the layers of Officer Rollins' career, the discoveries were sickening. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a lapse in judgment. Digging into his disciplinary file and cross-referencing buried civilian complaints, the FBI uncovered a dark, systematic pattern of abuse. Rollins had a history of targeting individuals based purely on prejudice, using his badge as a shield for his biases. They found records of 3 other victims, honorable men and hardworking citizens whose lives had been disrupted by illegal stops and falsified reports. One by one, these former victims were brought in for questioning. They told stories of intimidation, of being threatened with jail time if they dared report Rollins' behavior. This time, though, Rollins had picked the wrong fight. He had targeted a man with the rank, resources, and iron will to ensure the truth came to light. Federal agents meticulously reconstructed Rollins' career, revealing nearly a decade-long trail of violated rights. The digital forensic report proved he had consistently bypassed department protocols and ignored civil rights training. The hidden camera evidence captured not only the assault, but his complete lack of remorse and belief that he was above the law. The investigation escalated into a massive federal civil rights case. The system Rollins thought he controlled was now closing in, and for the first time, there was nowhere left to hide. The hunter had become the hunted. The day of the final hearing arrived with cold, piercing clarity. The courtroom was packed with reporters, military personnel in full uniform, and families of the victims Rollins had suppressed for years. When the judge took the bench, the air was heavy with impending justice. Rollins, stripped of his badge and bravado, sat at the defense table looking small, gray, and defeated. He no longer looked like the man who had slammed a commander against a jeep. The verdict hit like a thunderclap. Based on overwhelming evidence of civil rights violations, assault, and systemic corruption, the judge showed no mercy. Rollins was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The city and department were ordered to pay a massive $12 million settlement for the damage caused by their negligence. As the sentence was read, the courtroom erupted in gasps. Rollins was cuffed and led away in public disgrace. His career reduced to ashes. Outside the courthouse, Commander Marcus Reed stood with the same quiet dignity he had shown that morning at the mall. He didn't gloat or celebrate. Instead, he announced he would not keep a single cent of the settlement. He was donating the entire sum to a national foundation for veterans' justice and civil rights education. "I didn't fight for money," Reed told the silent crowd. "I fought for principle. This money belongs to the people to ensure no other citizen ever has to fear those sworn to protect them." Marcus Reed walked away not as a wealthy man, but as a man of honor. His story is more than a legal victory. It is a reminder that true power lies not in a badge or a gun, but in character. In a world where prejudice can still blind authority, integrity remains immovable. Justice arrived, slow but unforgiving, and no one stood above it.